Hello everyone, and I am your host Ingrid Thompson. Welcome to So You Want to Start a Business, episode number 77. Our guest today is Julia Carlson, and she and I have some similar views about wealth and financial freedom. I believe you'll find it a terrific conversation as you listen in while we talk all things money. We got talking about confidence, and here's what Julia had to say about gaining the confidence she needed to start her own business.
Oftentimes we're looking for that confidence at the beginning, but that only comes after you've made a commitment, after you've taken courage to keep going, after you've developed the hours and the capabilities, and that is when it delivers you to confidence. So I think sometimes if we can understand that, hey, I'm not going to have confidence, and I'm aware of that, but as long as I have the commitment to know what I'm doing is what I should be doing, like passion and purpose, and if you're committed and you're courageous and you keep going, you're going to gain that confidence along the way.
Julia got started in her financial business at the age of 23, and as a young woman in this traditional industry, she talks about confidence a number of times during our conversation. She offers up some really helpful ways to build confidence and to maintain confidence when we're in those tricky business moments. We also managed to talk about yoga and breathing and how important both are in our lives, and how to deal with those dramatic times in business and the impact breathing can have then. We talk about new team members and keeping things running smoothly. It's a pretty terrific conversation. As always, there's no advertising on this podcast. This episode is brought to you by my book with the same name as the podcast, So You Want to Start a Business. Head over to wherever you buy your books online for the Kindle or the physical book. If you don't already have a copy and you'd like to read an extract, head to thestartupsteps.com and there's about 20 pages waiting for you. The full audio version is being made available in this very podcast. You may want to cycle back through some of the recent episodes where I'm reading chapters of the book in the podcast, and there are still more chapters to come. Anyway, enough from me. Let's listen to what Julia has to say about starting and running her own business so that we can learn from her experience. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, and here we are today with Julia Carlson, and it's morning here in Sydney, and I believe it's early evening where you are, Julia. Hello.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. It is about 6 o'clock in the evening and beautiful night.
And beautiful night. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with our audience. I know everybody is going to appreciate your wisdom. So starting off, Julia, what business are you in? What is your business?
Well, I like to say I'm in the business of helping people find their financial freedom.
That sounds good.
Yes. But,
and how do you do that?
How do I do that? Well, we take people on a journey, but I do own a wealth management firm, and I like to call us wealth advisors as opposed to financial advisors. And that is because we don't talk just about finances. We like to take a very holistic view of our clients' lives and help them think about their finances, but also thinking about their dreams, their goals, like what does their perfect life look like, and then how can we help them reach that? And a lot of times that includes finances and strategies, and we're a partner with our clients in that.
So it's so much more than just about finances.
Yes.
So Julia, when did you start this business?
I started this business when I was 23 years old, and I am now 41.
Wow. So coming up close to 20-year anniversary. That's amazing.
Yes.
That's a long time to sustain a business. It sounds like you enjoy it. Now, why do you remember back to then at 22, why did you want to start your own business?
Yeah, I remember like it was yesterday. I live in a small community. I found my passion at a young age. I got married when I was 19. I went to work at a local bank, And I found myself really fascinated and interested in the investment department and finance. And I remember following around the advisor at the time, just asking all sorts of questions. And I took a job as an assistant in that investment department. They were awesome to me. They trained me. I got all my licenses. And after a couple of years, I was like, okay, I'm ready to help people. I don't want to be an assistant anymore. And at that point, they came back to me and said, well, we're in a pretty small community, and until the advisor retires, we can't have another advisor out there. So it was like at 23, I had kind of hit the glass ceiling, and I had to start looking at other options, and kind of found a perfect fit.
Isn't that fantastic? We just have to wait for the other person to go away, and then you can have your turn. So glass
20
ceiling
years later, right? Yeah.
Is he still there? Is he still there? Oh my God.
Just a couple years ago, he retired and came to me to help.
That's funny. Oh dear. So what did you want from the business from the beginning? So you were frustrated where you were, couldn't get on to do the helping. What did you want the business to be able to give you?
Well, what I saw at the bank is a lot of activity and a lot of volume, and it was always on to the next. And what I really wanted was to create relationships and more of like what I call now a fiduciary responsibility with my clients. Like, I wanted to not only talk to them once and get them set up correctly, but then I also wanted to be alongside them with that journey and really help them and to make a difference in their financial life. A lot of this money stuff is accountability and someone to talk to when you get stuck. And so whether you're in retirement, whether you're just starting out and in saving, whether you're starting a business and you have all these questions, it's like that all requires, someone to be able to talk to. So that I was just really passionate in helping people, figure out different ways to think about really complex things that they felt were complex. And kind of one of my unique abilities is to simplify it, put it in language that they understand. Maybe it's telling a story around it, or, and helping them, keeping it simple.
Yeah, and that is so important, especially around money and finance and wealth. Is one, it's a topic people don't talk about to other people because it's still considered, amongst certain generations and amongst certain people, it's just impolite to talk about things like that. And also most people don't understand it. Like, so having someone like you who makes it simple and who can have a confidential, as you say, a fiduciary conversation, that's what a lot of people actually really need, isn't it?
Yes, very true.
So when did you, and you may or may not kind of remember this moment, but most people do, is when did it feel like you were in business? Because you'd worked in the bank and then you're out there on your own. When did it feel like your business was real?
Yeah, so when I made that transition, I actually, because in my industry, because we have to hold licenses, you can't start a side business, right? So I had to actually quit the bank to start my own business. And I remember kind of being totally scared, and am I making the right decision? And all these what if scenarios are running through my head. And so my husband at the time had a very thriving business doing building homes. And I thought, boy, I think you need someone in the office to help kind of on a part-time basis. And so, so that was my security, right? So I talked him into, bringing me on to help. At that point, his old assistant was transitioning out. So I thought, okay, I can do this both while I'm building my business. And I remember about 3 months in, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to have time for both. Like, I wanted to put all of my energy, and I was having success. I wanted to have all my time, because we did not have kids at that point. So I had 3 months. I remember, I'm sorry, I have to quit. But I actually I actually found a replacement for him, and she's still there today.
Oh, isn't that fantastic? So 3 months was a pretty, I bet your husband was a bit surprised. It's like, 3 months, you've hardly been here. Oh dear, that's terrific. So how did you know that there were going to be customers? So as you said, it's a small community. The bank already had its position there. How did you know that your business could be viable? Because it's a big commitment to quit that job and go after this in the way that you did.
I think part of that is I saw the need when I was working at the bank. Like I saw so many people that needed our help so it was never, I don't remember ever having that feeling like people won't need me. It was, will people take me serious because I'm 23?
Yes.
So there was more of like overcoming age and confidence and a lot of that. But once I could actually get people to sit down with me, because I was a sponge, like I just totally self-taught this business. Like I wanted to learn so much that when they sat down with me, they were like, okay, she knows what she's talking about. She can add value here.
Yeah. So how did you, and I know it's a bit of a question without notice, but how did you overcome that at such a young age to talk to people who were probably twice, maybe even more older than you? Yeah. How did you overcome that?
So I had 2 sayings: fake it till you make it. And I remember listening to audios. Like at that point it was cassette tapes and CDs, and I was listening to Tony Robbins, and I was listening to, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. Who is that? Yep. Is it Byron Katie? I can't remember the author, but it was a woman, and it was just all about this getting outside your comfort zone and putting on that, like, all right, I'm doing this. It's like psyching myself up to go for it. And there was plenty of times that I was terrified, but I just kept going.
Just kept going. And then I imagine your business, as you got confidence, it gave you more confidence, that self-efficacy that just builds on itself, that once you get the clients, then you get more clients and it makes you feel more confident.
Yeah. And oftentimes I think when we're starting out, I think this is super important for new, people just starting their business. Oftentimes we're looking for that confidence at the beginning, but that only comes after you've made a commitment, after you've taken courage to keep going, after you've developed the hours and the capabilities, and that is when it delivers you to confidence. So I think sometimes if we can understand that, hey, I'm not going to have confidence, and I'm aware of that, but as long as I have the commitment to know what I'm doing is what I should be doing, like passion and purpose, and if you're committed and you're courageous and you keep going, you're going to gain that confidence along the way.
Julia, that's a very insightful way of describing confidence and where it comes from. I've never really heard anybody quite say it like that before. So listeners, if you weren't listening, just go back for the last minute or two and listen to what Julia just said there about how you actually get confidence, because I think that's a very unique way of looking at it and extremely helpful, because we often think we can't do something until we have the confidence. But what you're saying is that doing it and having that courage and having that commitment is actually what gives you the confidence. Thank you.
Yeah, yes.
So you said you got a job, because my next question is about how you funded the business in the early days. And I'm imagining that your sort of business doesn't actually take a lot of funding. I mean, you had to pay for your licenses, but you didn't have an income. So you couldn't do it as a side hustle and then build it. So you took a job. Was there any other funding that was necessary to get started? Because that is one of the big questions. People say, how am I going to pay for this as I get going?
Yeah. So no, we had prepared for it. So we had made sure that we saved up emergency funds. Thankfully, I am in an industry where there's not a lot of overhead. I worked at home. Actually. Let's see, I was 23. I didn't have my daughter until 26 maybe. So I worked at home for a good 3 years. Like I would travel to the clients' homes or coffee shops or wherever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I remember when kids came along, then I started I had to go. I remember renting out an attic of a CPA's office. Like I couldn't stand up. I'm 5'11". When I stood up, I hit my head on the attic because it was slanted.
And I know you're standing up for this interview because we had the visual before we got started, and I know standing up is so much easier when we're actually talking and doing things.
Yeah.
So 5'11" and bumping your head would be that was less than ideal, but it gave you that space.
It did.
Because commercial space is actually quite expensive. I mean, I do a lot of work with yoga, Pilates, health professionals, and that is one of the things they actually need to have a commercial space. So, you know, there's a real need for people to have some kind of income in order to be able to find a commercial space or find, like you say, an attic in someone else's workspace. So how did that work out for you, being near the accountants? Was that a good thing?
That was a good thing. You know, I realized that he was one of my mentors and circle of influence. And he was, the more that I found that I would be around him, the more that I was top of mind, that I was referable. And I was helping them. Like I was talking to people and being a part of that office, that it really did foster my business in those early days. And I learned a lot from being there. I actually went from his attic to his garage. And then still today, like my husband actually built 2 years ago, we saved up money and we built like a 4,000 square foot office where now, and I can look out across the way and see the ocean one way, and I actually look and see that attic out another window.
Oh, isn't that lovely? Just to remind you where it all started.
Yes.
So if we think about how you find customers, so you've talked there, or clients really, as you would refer to them probably. So that accountant was one way, but you know, in the early days and then as your business has grown, how did you know who those customers were and how do you find them?
Well, in the beginning, I was willing to help anyone and everyone. I remember creating a letter of what I was doing, and I mailed it to our Christmas card list. I became part of the chamber. I am still very much involved in the community. So in a small community, I think that if you're putting yourself out there, and in the beginning, I think it's hard because you're trying to make money, and oftentimes those networking events and volunteering, all of that takes a little time to create that reputation and bringing in, getting to know people, get the trust, rapport, and all of that. But that was key to, when I look back now, we have people walking in and calling our offices every week because we've built that reputation in the community that we're willing to help and willing to serve and providing value.
Yeah, isn't that, and you know, people underestimate how much all of that can actually contribute to really building a solid base that people are keen to get going, get fast results, but that base takes a while to get started, doesn't it?
It does, but now with social media, I think it's a lot easier to put yourself out there. But again, even on social media, what works the best that we've found is actual videos, right? People want to see, they want to glimpse into your life and who you are. And so, and it's hard to just, go live or post videos when you're not confident. So
yeah, exactly. But you could, people can get around that with, using a board to describe something, or they can show footage and you can talk over footage. There are different ways, I think, of solving that video question.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe your industry is sort of regulated in terms of pricing, because I have a question about pricing, and we don't need to know exactly how much you charge people and things like that, but is there flexibility for you to decide a pricing strategy, or is that something that's kind of how all the wealth planners and financial people work?
Yeah, no, we decided our fee schedule, and in the beginning, when 20 years ago, it was pretty much just commission based. That was a given, right?
Right.
So you sell this product, you get X percentage, X percentage. Now we've evolved to where we are more of a fiduciary model, advisory model, where clients are, we have a published schedule of our fees that are pretty standard for all of our clients.
That's fantastic, and you're clear about what that is, that it goes out. We're in Australia right now. We're having a royal commission into the whole industry because there's been such a lot of skullduggery going on with fees and charging, and we're not really quite sure where that's all going to land. But the superannuation and banking and financial industry is having the spotlight shone on it right now because of this lack of clarity.
Yeah, and I think, our industry has not done this well. I mean, the whole idea of transparency, I totally believe in, but the problem with it is, to me, it may be transparent, but to an everyday client, to put that in the fine print on 1,000 pages is not clarity, right? So. Yeah.
It's not. And that tiny print, who can even read it? And yeah.
Right.
So thinking about where this is going to go, so you're up to nearly 20 years, your children are reaching a stage in their lives where they sounds like they're teenagers or so. Do you have an exit strategy? Have you thought about that? Or what do people like you do afterwards? Or And so you don't have to tell us what it is. You can just give us in philosophical.
So I do have one. I have what we would refer to as a buy sell, or if something were to happen to me, and all all of that is set in place. I would say a succession strategy. We're developing that to be more internal. So thinking about looking at staff and grooming people up in through the business. I would love for one of my kids, I have 3 kids, I would love for one of them to enter the business, but at the same time, I want them to go do what they love and what they're passionate about. And if it happens to be this, then that would be definitely something that would be kind of incorporated into that plan.
Julia, thank you for that. Succession strategy is I'm going to add that into that question for future interviews, actually, because that is such a good way. It's not just about exit, it's about succession. And because that can be part of their strategy for how to come out of a business and have other people doing what you do. Are any of your offspring showing an interest at this stage?
I would say my middle or youngest, and so my teenager, not so much, but I think the younger 2 have potential, although my boy, which is my youngest, pretty much thinks he's going to go into business with his dad.
So
I've got a little competition.
Oh yeah, with 2 parents running their own business. Which one do we choose? So a little bit of reflection now. So I know it's a long time ago, but over the time, is there anything you wish you'd done differently?
I think in the beginning, I wanted to be all things to all people. And now I've realized that the more authentic that I am, and the more that I realize who my ideal client is and who I enjoy working with, that is kind of a natural attraction if you're willing to be just authentic, right? And so I think going back, if I could do it again, it would be willing to put myself out there more in the beginning. And to have a clearer idea about who you really wanted to work with. So is there something you wish you'd known from the start? And this is a slightly different question, because often when we get into business, it's like so many things. You look at something from the outside and you think, I can do this. And then once you're inside, you think, wow, I wish I'd known this. Was there anything that you can think of that would have been helpful for you to know? Well, I think the part about the confidence was key, right? And also, at different stages in my business, it's like I have different complexities, different problems. So in the beginning, I used to be super reactive and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Oh dear. And now I can be way less reactive because of my experience,
Yes.
right? But also I've learned this idea of intention. So the intention of, if there is a problem, I immediately go to, what is the learning? What is the gift? What am I learning? You know, how do we move forward, and how can we learn from this experience?
Mm.
And that's made me a better leader, as well as in my own personal life with the kids and all of that, just way less reactive, which just takes a lot of the stress out of it.
That's yeah, such a good point. I went back to yoga this morning. I haven't been to this particular yoga teacher for a while, and I've made a decision about my Friday mornings that I'm going to be able to go and just make the time for that. And she reminded me of something that she's always said, is that when something happens, it's so easy to feel dramatic and, oh, why is this happening to me? And she said a very useful way to look at it is to look at it and say, well, that's interesting. Now, what am I going to do about it?
Yes.
And you've said something very similar yourself about how you now respond to things, whether it's the children or the business or whatever, that it's that observing it and saying, okay, so now what am I going to do? And I just think when T said this morning, using those two words, you know, well, that's interesting. And it just distances us from it, doesn't it? And it just takes some of that heat and some of the drama out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we need tools for that, because you don't just do that, do you? You need to have a tool for how to diffuse that sort of, because it's very easy to feel anxious in the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. And for me, I've learned that it's breathing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so oftentimes my when I'm in that state, it's like my breathing is super shallow, but if I can just like close my eyes and breathe real deep, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gonna get through this.
And it floods the body with oxygen, and there's lots of reasons breathing works, isn't there?
Yeah.
So if you think about the people in your business that have been of greatest assistance, now you've mentioned your husband and how he, you know, employed you in those early days, but and your colleagues there at the corporate, when you were at the bank, you know, you asked questions and they answered you. But over time, who has been of greatest assistance to you? You can either name names or just talk philosophically about who has been of help to you.
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting when I look back there, I have definitely had less than one hand, some amazing mentors that have stepped in, and not stepped in like they were coming to me and saying, hey, can we help you? That what I mean is I saw what they had and I wanted it, and I said, can you help me? And they probably had a lot of people come to them and say that, but I think what made a difference and why I got the help from that was everything. I was coachable. Like everything they told me to do, I did.
Yes.
And at some point I've outgrown actually some of my mentors, and now they ask me questions. And I also that, you know, it's hard, but it's like you have got to recognize that and letting go and constantly trying to put yourself in surrounded by people that are smarter than you.
Yeah. I remember interviewing someone quite early on in the podcast series, and he said he never wants to be the smartest person in the room. He loves being in a room where pretty much everybody's smarter than him, because you don't learn when you're the smartest person in the, you know, apart from it being a whole lot about ego anyway, who gets to say who's the smartest. But yeah. So Julia, when you're looking for feedback, and this can either be you know, for your business or for you personally, where do you get useful feedback?
Yeah, well, it kind of goes along with the previous question.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah, so I actually hired in 2013 Chandran, who is my president of my company. He has like 30 years of executive management background from corporations, like, you know, pretty large corporations that he's run. He's been the CEO of, and he was willing to, come into a very entrepreneurial spirited company, right? And really help. And at the beginning, my ego was getting involved, and he was giving me little hints and tips, and maybe you should do, typically around management, managing and man, when I surrendered to that and could really let go and be able to delegate and trust, it's like, that's when we got our wings, because what I realized was I was my own worst enemy in the management aspect of it. So I kind of look at it the way that we talk to our employees is, Julia's on the front of the boat and she's saying, here's where we're going. And this is my vision. I'm very visionary, where Chandran is very, he can put all the pieces together. So he's on the back of the boat, overseeing all the people, all the staff on the boat, and making sure we're all going in the same direction.
What a great combination. And you really need people like that in a business, don't you?
Yeah. And I didn't want to listen at first, but we stuck with it, went through some like pretty head to head, really tough conversations, but we stuck with it and made it through. And now it's like just an amazing partnership.
Isn't that fantastic? And good on both of you for sticking with it, because sometimes when you get to those sticky points, it could be tempting to just walk away or dissolve things or but you must have both known somehow that you belonged together.
Yes.
That you really were both heading in the same direction. You just needed to get on the same boat.
Yeah, and it's good.
It is good. It sounds like it is. So if someone comes to you, and I imagine sometimes your clients would actually say to you, oh, I would love to start my own business, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say that the one thing that we all should realize is we're really good at some things and not so good at others. And I think traditionally we always say, okay, I'm going to work on my weaknesses, but I would say opposite. So I would say, what are you really good at? And we're going to find someone else that's going to make up the difference in your weaknesses. And we've done something on our team called Kolbe. I don't know if you're familiar.
No.
It's Kolbe, and it's a test. It's not a personality test, but it is a test that tells the individual, tells me as the business owner, what their MO is, like how are they wired? How is it will never change, right? Your Kolbe will never change. So for me, I'm what we call a quick start, and I like have ideas and I'm all over the place, and where other people are follow-throughs, where they love systems, they love organization, they love putting all the pieces together. So when you discover your strengths and then you can match yourself on your team with your weaknesses, then that is a perfect scenario.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we tend to think we should build the weaknesses rather than, like you say, hiring it or finding someone else to fill that space, and really focus on what we're good at. Stay in your genius, stay in what it actually is the best that you can contribute. Yeah, I have to look into that, Kolbe. We'll do some research and put that in the show notes as well. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so 3 characteristics that you have, and you've already alluded to a couple of them. So if the listeners have been listening closely, they possibly can preempt what you're going to say here. But what are the 3 characteristics that make you successful in business, Julia?
So I love this question, and it's also the first chapter of my book. Desire, determination, and discipline.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
So desire for
what is your desire, your purpose.
Yes.
So if you can stay in your purpose, then you don't need motivation, because you're driven by your deep internal why.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I talk about that in my book as well, is that and it is that is what sustains you on the days when you just can hardly put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
So, Julia, do you want to tell us a little bit about your book right now? That sounds like a nice way to give you that, so you can tell us what the book is about and how it can help the listeners.
Yeah, so it's my book is called Fit Money, 7 Steps to Get Your Financial Life in Shape.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it after I had my 3 kids. I needed to get back in shape. I needed to lose the baby weight. And so I decided to commit to competing in a figure bodybuilding competition. Yes, a little extreme, but I ended up competing for about 5 years. And what I discovered is the same skills and steps that I did to get my body in the best shape are the same skills people need to get their financial life in shape. And so when I was kind of ready to stop competing, that was like the next year's project where I just wanted to create this little book, easy to read. And I love sharing it. So actually, if anyone wants to get the book, they can download a free copy off of my website.
Well, we'll certainly put that into the notes, because I know financial understanding is something that's so important for people to get fit finance. And, you know, even people who are really well, or who might think that they're really well organized in terms of finance, and you know, they're already getting maybe some advice from someone else. There's always something else you can learn from something like your book, from, you know, your webinars and podcasts and interviews and your materials. So I encourage anyone listening to go. We'll put the link in the show notes, but if you wanted, Julia, just say your website, and that makes it easy for people right now.
Sure. So it is Financial Freedom, WMG, like Wealth Management Group.com.
And the ebook is right there to download.
Yeah. If you go to Resources, Fit Money.
Fit Money, there we go. That'll be nice and easy. I'll be getting a copy myself. So is there anything else, Julia, you'd like to add that we haven't covered? And I know our audience is people, you know, wanting to start a business or aspiring entrepreneurs. And I know your audience is partly this, and it's more than that, but there's probably other people listening. So is there anything from your business perspective or anything else that you'd like to add right now while we're having our conversation?
Yes, I'd love to. I think when I think back, when you're unsure, or when you're just getting started, because there is that lack of confidence at times, oftentimes we want to talk to our family and friends, and oftentimes those are the people that love us most. We're seeking approval, and oftentimes it may not come from them. And I think looking back, it's important to listen to people that are where you want to be. And oftentimes too, trusting yourself and that kind of internal guidance or your intuition. I always find it's like, I want to talk to people about things, but oftentimes, you know, for my real mentors and friends, they'll be like, Julia, you already know the answer to this question. So, you know, that internal knowing of trusting yourself and looking and taking time out to listen and be within is super important.
It's super important. And I thank you so much for reiterating that. We do hear that from time to time on the podcast, but it's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of what we're doing. And, you know, as you said in the beginning of your business, you know, you were doing everything and you wanted to do everything, and we can't. You know, there has to be space for thinking and space for ideas. And often our families just don't understand because they don't have a reference. I mean, your children are growing up in an environment with 2 entrepreneurial business owners, so that's quite different. But, you know, for people who've grown up in a world where it's get a job, go to university, go to college, you know, it's hard for them to understand the what's going on in a business because it's such a different frame, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah.
Oh, Julia, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure our audience will be downloading that book. Thank you again so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Julia was quite honest about her business journey, wasn't she? And those relationships within her team, well, I'm sure some of us had a bit of a chuckle at that. She referred to the Colby tool. We'll put the notes in the show notes for that. And Fit Money is her book, so you can download that on her website, www.financialfreedomwmg.com, Fit Money. So, what are you taking away from this interview? For everyone listening, whether this is your first episode or you've been with us for some time, I truly believe that whatever it is you're dreaming about can become real. These podcasts are designed to inspire, educate, and inform about what it takes to start, create, and grow a business of your own. We truly believe that these podcast interviews provide terrific value. And if you agree, please leave your comments and rate the podcast over on iTunes. We all know that how we spread the word when we put our comments and we put our recommendations. Thank you so much for that. So what questions do you have? How can I help you? Email me any question to ingrid@healthynumbers.com.au and I'll reply directly. I answer all my own email questions because it's important that you have what you need. As always, we say ideas without action. Well, they're just that, aren't they? They're just ideas. So what actions are you inspired to take today? Till the next time, thank you so much for listening.